Now, one question you may be considering is why do biceps curls? Most people who do biceps curls are doing it because they want big biceps. Maybe purely for aesthetic reasons, to pose on the beach or pose down at the bar of the pub. But basically the question is it functional? Is it actually of any practical use to have large biceps? Well, there are a couple of issues in that. First of all, there's a difference between having large biceps and having strong biceps. And secondly, the question is, what are you going to do with your biceps? Now, firstly, fine, if you want to develop large biceps for the sake of it, why not? There are certainly worse things you can do. However, for somebody involved in many sports, running being one of them, particularly endurance running, but many other sports, martial arts of some types, all sorts of things, there's a limit to how large you want your biceps to be. After a while it simply becomes added bulk that will get in the way. However, there's a difference between talking about biceps size and biceps strength. It's quite possible, just as with every other weights exercise, to develop very strong biceps without growing them to huge size. And strong biceps can be useful for a number of activities. Naturally, there are sometimes in some sports where you can see biceps may be an advantage. It's perhaps harder to see where biceps are an advantage in endurance running, but I will explain that in just a moment. But for other sports, maybe sometimes this is overlooked. If you look at, say, combat sports such as boxing or similar martial styles, most people think of the action of the triceps throwing a punch out. It's the tricep that straightens the arm. And of course you can see that. However, if you're involved in a combat sport like that, you will probably realise you don't actually want to leave your arms sticking out there. Generally speaking, you want to bring it back just as fast as you've thrown it. And it's the biceps, in fairness, it's also the relaxation of the triceps, but it's the contraction of the biceps that brings the arm back. So you want to be able to throw a punch out, but you also want to pull it back fast, otherwise someone will pull your guard down. In addition, depending on your style, anybody who rotates as they punch, something like this, whether it be karate style or just like that, is the biceps is involved in rotation of the arm. So again, there's plenty of reason for working on your biceps in that respect. Of course, if someone comes from a wrestling type background, some sort of grappling type activity, the biceps is what's used to pull someone closer. Now, this might be putting a lock on somebody or other, putting some sort of sleeper hold on someone, for example, or even just grabbing someone and pulling them down so you can knee them in the head. All of these things involve a certain amount of biceps motion. Now, that's all well and good. Plenty of sports involve the biceps in one way or another, but what about running? Well, okay, sprinters, fair enough. You tend to see most sprinters with relatively large upper body mass, including the biceps, partly because of this vigorous arm action that they use typically when sprinting. Again, it's not unlike punching. Part of it is pushing the arm forward, part of it is pulling the arm back, and of course the biceps are involved there. But what about ultra distance? Surely you don't need particularly strong biceps if you're going to run for 4 or 5 days. I mean, after all, it's your legs you're using, right? Well, yes and no. It does kind of depend on what you're doing with your arms. If you have a habit, for example, of running with your arms up, keeping them tucked close to the body, even if you're relatively relaxed and resting them, if you're keeping your arms held up like this for 12 hours, 24 hours, 48-hour race, you know, let alone like William 6-day races, 1,000-mile races, you can probably see the biceps actually are involved here. You know, the arm doesn't just stay there by itself unless you put a bit of string around your neck and whatever and tie it to your wrists. The biceps is partly involved in keeping the arm up. So while you're running along, even if you're using a very subtle, small, economic motion, the biceps are still involved there. So, like almost every muscle in the body, it's worth training them, even for something like ultra distance. Just to make that point, I'll stop talking and just show you a little bit of footage of William. I'll shoot him now and you can look at the motion of his arms as he mimics running. Now, I talked a little bit about the arm action with running. As you can see, here William's using what for him is a relatively vigorous arm action. And as you can see, he's raising and lowering his arms, the sort of thing that he'd be doing if he was running at for ultra, a relatively fast pace. And as you can see, it involves the motion of the biceps. Now, if you slip into more like of a relaxed thing, like, you know, as though you're sort of doing a long distance run, okay, it slows down, but the arms are still involved. Even if William tucks his arms up high, just carries them to the chest to try and conserve energy. There you go, still small motions, but still that biceps action's involved there. Now, clearly, the biceps aren't the major muscle involved in running. However, they are used, whether running short distances very fast with vigorous arm action, or running very long distances for a very long period of time. All of them involve an arm action and require at least some bicep strength and endurance.